The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style. From the highs to the lows, every story just explodes. Mike's got questions on the go, diving deep from head to toe. Every week the guests align, sharing moments so divine. Stay with us, the pace is fine. Every episode you'll find. The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style.
Welcome to the Big H Podcast, and I'm welcoming retired Lieutenant Colonel Jason Gentile to the podcast. Jason, it is truly an honor to be bringing you to the people of Hilton and then some. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a long time, and I appreciate seeing you again.
Yes, we brushed shoulders there at a Hilton football game in the fall, and I truly didn't know who you were, but you were really active on the sidelines, and the kids they got into you. They knew something was up, and then I finally asked Coach Bob, "Who is that?" And he said, "Oh, that's Jason Gentile." And I thought, "Oh my God!" For those, and then we'll get going on questions.
I think I changed that much.
No. But I'm like, oh boy, I remember this guy. Truth be told, our paths first crossed when you were in high school, and we decided to cover football games and then we'd play them the following week on a local cable channel. Mm-hmm. And you were a captain, I believe, with Van Zeelen and Tim Hughes. Pretty decent season.
Tim Hughes and Christopher Van Zeelen. Yeah, good season. Lost to Arcadia in the semis.
And it was, it was great for us. We had a great time following you. Let's go back to those days at Hilton a little bit.
Sure.
I believe you were the class of 1994. Sure. Is that correct?
I was a graduate in 94.
Okay. And what are some of your school memories? I guess we can go back to, those in-school memories if you want to dip into your sports memories as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember Hilton's such a fun place. And I've been around the world and I've seen a lot of things. But, something that I recall, even outside the sport, was just the teachers we had. Some was passed. We talked about Mr. Dowd passing, Mr. Klingler just passed. Tom Metherall was fantastic. Ojar Vitas, fantastic individuals, if anyone remembers it from middle school. And then just we had a great administration. And then obviously playing for Coach Will Prince in JV. And then, and I credit Will for really starting the upstart in the football program with those two JV teams, one being Scotty Phillips' team, and then the next year was my team. But then, obviously playing for Rich Lapani was very special. And I always say this, I came back to Hilton for the first time, and years later, it was because of Rich, and it was really special. When that night on the sidelines, I saw you guys, it was the first time I had been back. And it was it was very emotional. It was very emotional for me, to see Coach Foreman and Coach Bob and, of course, Coach Lapani. And then serendipitously, Dan Bates was across coaching for McQuaid. Mm-hmm. And those were some special years. And what I recall most about Hilton, and again, I've seen a lot of things. And I live in Alaska now. It's very different. It was just a sense of community, right? And everybody's still kind of there. And, I've seen I've been around the world, whether it's in our combat or other places or Europe or Asia. And, I always think back to Hilton, and I always thought I'd come back there. And, it didn't happen. Life changes, but it was just a very special place. And in those years I was there, it was very special. We were the first team to win the Section 5 title. which was the equivalent of the States back then, if you remember.
Sure do.
And then the next year we went back, and it just kind of started that successful Hilton football program. And I also got to play hockey for great people like Mike D'Alessano and Tom Dowd and Bruce Klingler and Earl. Yeah, Earl Utter. Old school.
It's good that you remember a lot of those coaches. And
it was a special place.
In terms of leadership, what are some of those characteristics that those people that you were taught by, coached by, that instilled leadership qualities in you?
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of years ago, I had a chance to go back and talk to the team just for like an hour at the most when I was traveling for some work stuff. And I told those players, what I learned from the coaches, especially from Coach Prince and Coach Lapani, was, with Will Prince, he taught me to truly be a disciplined player and control my emotions to an extent, as much as a teenager can. And then with Coach Lapani, with Rich, what I learned from him, and I still carry to this day when I'm coaching or I'm in my profession, is, how to systematically approach, whether it's the game of football or my life, through physical fitness. How do I approach my career? How do I approach my children, And, seeing Rich, he's the master of that, really is. I don't want to call him compartmentalization, but he really knows how to focus on the most important command and how do you get it done. And that was really impactful in my life. And I use that in combat operations. And I would talk about that with my soldiers before missions in Iraq or Afghanistan. I'd be like, Rich Lapani's watching. They go, who's Rich? They'd be like, who's Rich Lapani? I'm like, never mind, you don't know. I actually called Rich once or twice from Iraq.
No kidding. What was that conversation like?
I'm trying not to be emotional. I mean, usually it's after something bad happened, or I lost a soldier, lost a friend, or major action happened, or we got mortared, or we did a raid at night or the day. I mean, and I would just talk to them just to check up on how they're doing. I'd call them, and I'd be on this sweaty ass payphone, and then I have a payphone. It's like these we call them. It's not culture appropriate. It's called the Haji phone. And this wooden shack, and it's 130 degrees, and you're trying to call, and it's my god. And it was just great to hear his voice, and it was kind of. And I didn't get too emotional. I had a lot of things to do downrange. My tours were expanded like years, like 15 months, 14 months, 13 months, 15 months. Those are long tours. Yeah, so it was great to hear that voice and just talk to them. You know how Rich gets. He's like, oh man.
Well, there was a time when I believe you were retiring, and you had sent him an invite to your graduation, and it was at a banquet, and he wanted to read the invitation. And Rich can be a very emotional guy, and he gave it to Coach Foreman, and Coach Foreman read it to the audience, and it was very moving. I think you realize just how much you meant to him, and he meant a lot to you. But when you're putting your life on the line in those situations, it's just awestruck.
Yeah. Carla Filippetti told me about that they read that letter, and I didn't think anything of it. I actually, and then we were talking about it, and I cried. I cried, and then when I saw Coach Foreman, I get a little emotional still. He told me that he read that letter, and it meant a lot. It meant a lot, and that place meant a lot to me. And some of the greatest impactful memories that I have that started me on this journey happened there and on that field. Well, not in that field because they're redoing that field, but it was on the other field.
Right.
I've seen it here.
Right.
These kids are lucky. They don't know how. Listen, whoever listening, you don't know how good that field you have is. I was blown away how good it is.
Yeah, tell
Yeah,
our
we're gonna go
audience. Tell
snack
our
chat.
audience. I'm sorry to interrupt. Tell our audience what was going on your senior year
Oh,
with the construction of the other one.
horrible. So this is awful. As Lapani'd say, horrendous. They decided to redo the field because the crown was so high. It was grass, and they redid the track. And I was like, I'm gonna swear, I'm like, you got to be shitting me.
Mm-hmm.
We just came off the championship season, and they're gonna do this shit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But in true Hilton fashion, Western New York fashion, we kind of we got to do what you got to do, and you play where you play.
Right.
It doesn't matter. We played on the JV field. I don't even know if that's the JV field anymore.
It's actually a softball diamond now, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like they had the bleachers, and we'd still get a couple thousand people, as you
Mm-hmm.
recall.
Mm-hmm.
But it just, it's one of those things. And if there's players listening or people listening, it doesn't matter where you play,
Right.
as long as you play, and you better show up and you better play. It does not matter. You can play in a gravel pit. You better go and do that. And I learned those things out there.
Now, you were on the sectional title the season before then.
I scored a touchdown in that game.
Tell the audience a little bit about that sectional winning season.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing, honestly. For me personally, I didn't start. I was only playing special teams,
Mm-hmm.
and then I got the call to be because we ran the wishbone back then. It wasn't a huge passing game. We had Dave Fleming, and I love Dave, but we just didn't pass the ball that much.
Right.
We had Scott Phillips, and Scott could run to daylight.
Mm-hmm.
Best high school running back I ever played with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got the call about game 3 in Batavia. And I got to be blocking back for Scotty. And I started to carry the ball. I'd only carry the ball like I was a junior, and this is the lesson the kid's not playing a lot. I'd carry the ball maybe 3-4 times a game, and I get 3.5 to for my father be like, my father's like, well, hey, just get 3.5 yards, 4 yards, and you're good.
Right.
And the season just came together, and we ended up in the finals against Irondequoit, and Jeff Stewart was the running back. I remember everything. God, what was the coach's name for Irondequoit?
Was it Wade Bianco?
It was Coach Bianco.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up in Faubourg Stadium, and we were down. We were down 12-6 at the half, and we came back. We won the game like 23-12.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I got to score a touchdown in the first half, and it snowed. And then Scotty, it was lights out. I mean, blocking for Scott Phillips, the whole way. I still have the highlights of that video. Will Prince sent it to me a few years ago, and I watch it every once in a while just to kind of remember that was fast. But it was a special time, and to win that championship was incredible for Hilton. It was just incredible. And for people, and for teams for Hilton who haven't won that sectional, it's the greatest feeling ever. And when I came back, sorry if I'm talking too much here.
No, go for it.
When I came back in September to see the McQuaid game, Rich and I got to go around to the trophy case because they didn't have the trophy in there before, and they moved it, and it's still there. And and I'm there in the photo, my teammates obviously, and our names are on the trophy, and it was special. Like it was very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you almost feel like Banksy talks about. The artist used to talk about. You die 2 deaths. First, your physical death, and then the second time is when your name is spoken for the last time.
Mm-hmm.
And in some part of me, and I know I'm not equating myself to any greatness. I'm just an average person, but my name will be in there for as long as Hilton's there, and they have that trophy case. It almost felt like if you watch Hoosiers, at the end of Hoosiers, when the young kids shooting baskets, and they got the picture of the 54 team, which is based on the Milan, Indiana high school team, but they're there, and it's the only, and it's great. And I hope the Hilton players, I really hope they get to experience that. because it's something. It's amazing.
And that was 1993 then that you won that?
That was the 92 season.
Okay.
Because remember, I graduated in 94, so 92. 93.
Okay, so then you come back 93, you're defending champions.
Yep.
How many guys came back from that championship team, and how'd that regular season go?
Yeah. So we had myself, Tim Hughes, Chris Van Zeelen, Matt Flagg, Matt Kibbe, Rick Freeman. Who else on the team? There's a bunch. Just give me a second. Oh, Johnny Wegman.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned Tim Hughes already. Pat LaBarbera, Chad McBroom. My memory's not what it used to be.
Well, you're doing pretty well, actually.
Chad McBroom. Who else? We had Mike Nealon. Mike Nealon was the kicker. And then we had a few other additions. We added John Crumley. Now John had played as a sophomore, and I mean Johnny and were great friends. And and then we added Tony Streb, and it was and then Brian Cunningham. And look, we got Brian. I was still hanging out with guys. So that was the majority. We had the core of the people. And the season was good. Like we remember we opened up with East Rochester, and we won 21-7. Tony scored like two or three touchdowns. He was great. I knew what my role was going to be. When he ran, I was like, man, this kid's fast. Right. And I got a lot of heart and desire, Coach Carmen. But that's about all I got. Right. I'm a strong ranger. But and then we went on a tear. We won all of our games up until we played Batavia, and I think we were 5-0. And we lost by 1 point. And Jerry Williams was the quarterback. I remember this for Batavia, and great guy. I missed outside contain. This haunts me to this day. And he ran in, and they won by 1 point. I think it was like 26-25 or something. And I cried. I cried. But the biggest highlight of that season, and I'll tell you, was a couple for me personally, was the Churchill Charlie game. I ran for 150 yards that game. 27 carries. I mean, in high school, the kids don't care like that anymore. Right. We played both ways. You gotta remember, I played defensive end, outside linebacker. And that was interesting because I coach high school football now. Occasionally, I haven't coached in a few years, but the kids play one way or they don't play all the special teams, and we played every way. And I just remember being so sore from those games. Like, God, I'm really good on Sunday. And then the other game that stuck out to me was the Olympia game. Tony had a fantastic game. He scored 2 touchdowns, and I scored 1. And but I had 10 carries for 99 yards or 98 yards. Brian Barlow, he robbed me of 2 yards. I told Barlow he shouldn't give me those 2 yards. Yeah, I saw him. He was later. I was like, you should give me those 2 yards. It sounds better. 10 for 100. Sure. And I had a couple sacks, and it was a great game. Olympia was a great team. They had Jeff Smith at quarterback, Scotty Ackerman, Ed Wegman, Adam Rogers, who was an incredible running back. I played with him at Brockport. They had Casey Flynn, Sorry, I do remember all the guys. I don't know how I can remember it all. I remember it all.
It's incredible. And
it was an incredible season. And, it ended with Arcadia.
In Arcadia. So was that the first round of sectionals, or was that the second one?
It was, yeah. Yeah, Bakari Hines ran all over us.
Were they just better, or you guys just played poorly? What do you remember of that game?
We fumbled. And as you can learn from the Ravens-Bills game, if you fumble, if you turn the ball over, you're not going to win. If you turn the ball over, you're not going to win. And you'll take away your chances. And that's not a knock on the Bills, because I want the Bills to win.
Me too.
I want it more than anything. So yeah, no, it was a season. It was one of those games, it just and then you're out of time, and then it's over. And as I tell players, I said, you're going to want that time back because you don't get to play again, especially football. You can't just go out and play backyard football because you'll kill yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You can, but yeah.
So, any all league, any all county awards that you won?
Yeah, I was first team all county. I made the AGR and I made the Eddie Meath game.
And the most coveted award you won your senior.
Special.
Can you tell the audience?
I did. I won the. Thank you. I was the first recipient. Do they still do that award?
No, but you were the only one, the first and
the only of the polio string cheese player of the game. And yours truly, Mike Heiss, made that up. Mm-hmm. I still have it.
I'm glad because, it was actually not just the player. You got the player of the game, but you also got the polio string cheese player of the year award. So
I did.
Okay.
And I'll tell you one thing that stood out for me that season. And I remember this clearly. In 1989, I watched Hilton play. They had a good team. That's Rich's first year, and he had tackle who was amazing. I forgot the kid's name. Tackle who was amazing. I forgot the kid's name.
Was it Kevin Rule?
Something.
Was it Kevin Rule?
He was incredible. Mm-hmm. Kevin Rule. And the running back was Scott Puckett. Mm-hmm. Scotty Puckett. And I was in the Army, ironically. But my dad took me to the Eddie Meath game at Falver, and I saw Scott Puckett and Kevin Rule, his first Hilton players, because Hilton, I ever saw play like in an All-Star game. And I switched me out. My dad, I want to be like that. I want to be like that as a senior. And, it all kind of came together for me. And it was a great time. And I credit Coach Lapani for that, and all the other coaches.
What about hockey?
And lifting weights. If any players are listening, lift weights.
Yeah, go ahead. Talk a little bit about that physical preparation and maybe even a little bit of the mental preparation.
Absolutely. So, what I notice now is the kids don't lift as hard. I'm not saying all the kids. We had to live it though. You had to be part of it at all time. For me anyway, to be, I was singly focused on football in school. That's all I had. I didn't date or anything like that at the time. I was like, if it's football, it's school. And lifting weights really helped. We had a core group of guys, like those 7 guys I had mentioned, that went to the gym religiously. And Coach Lapani, I think he still does this. He'd track us, and you could we used to do the lift-a-thon, and it really helps. And I tell guys, it's like putting armor on the chassis because you've got to strengthen your body. I'm 50 years old. I'll be 50 years old this year, and I'm telling you, because of lifting weights when I was in high school and all the stuff, I could still feel fit. Things that I didn't think I could be able to do at this age. Mm-hmm. I'm not done yet, but and the mental preparation is just learn that from Coach Lapani, just being quiet, focused. You've said everything right, and you just set the tone before you go on the field.
You also said that you coach now?
I did. I coached for high school. I'm the assistant coordinator. We went to state finals my second year coaching. But my kids were my twins are 22. I have older kids, and I took some time off because my youngest is a big time volleyball player. London. She's actually in Hawaii right now. She just finished up a tournament with her mother. And so she's a freshman. So I want to focus on her. But I did coach there, and I coached at West High School. And up here in Alaska, just so people are aware, we've got some really good players. We have a huge Polynesian community. Hold on one second. Okay.
You were saying that you have a big Polynesian community?
Yeah, so Brandon Peely, he plays for the Dolphins. He's up here. His sister was the number 8 pick in the WNBA last year, right behind Kevin Clark.
Okay.
So it's a different style of football up here, but the kids are humongous. It's not as fast as the lower 48, but they do it spread, very athletic. We go to play in Hawaii. You got to fly up to not Bethel, Barrow, Alaska, which is the roof of the world.
Okay.
It's the roof of the where that blue field is. There's a blue field up there actually for the high school kids, and
Okay.
so it's interesting. You got to fly over the state because there's no road. But I took that. When I was coaching, I took the toughness I learned from Rich and the organization, and I implemented it to the kids, and it helped us go to the States. I was the defensive coordinator, but also the strength and conditioning coach. I would yell things to the kids, and like the grapes are growing in gates, like we yell things, and they look at me like, "Where's Gates?" I'm like, it's in New York. They go, and they go, "Coach, to New York City." I'm like, no, it's not the same.
Now, you said did your son play football for you?
No, I would never coach my son. God, no.
Okay.
He played for the high school.
Okay.
And his twin sister played volleyball. And
Okay.
then my baby, London, she's 15, she's 5'7". She's my shining star for volleyball.
Which is she in college, right then?
No, she's 15. She's a freshman. She's varsity at Chugiak High School.
Oh, my bad. So you got twins and then a 15-year-old.
And a 15-year-old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you said something interesting, and I'd like to delve into it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'd never coach my kid. Tell me a little bit about, I don't know, why you feel that way and why it might be a good thing.
Yeah, it's a special kind of poison, right, coaching your kid? One, if your kid is great, there's going to always chatter about, well, that's the coach's kid, and that's why they start. I mean, it can be that way.
Mm-hmm.
My son was a decent football player. He wasn't the caliber football player that I was, and it has nothing to do with my son. He's a great kid, a great young man. Excuse me. It had everything to do with where I grew up and how we prepared at Hilton. It's just as you get up in Alaska, football's not as dominant. It's not like that Friday Night Lights that we saw. It still exists in Western New York. Every game for me was we have to win.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand when players are like, "Oh, it's okay. It'll be another game." Well, maybe there's not another game.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back to the question, though, so I didn't want to really coach my son and put those expectations on him because I know who I am. I can be Colonel Gentile and like, hey, man, no excuses.
Right.
There are no excuses.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that from Rich because there are no excuses from Rich. There's none.
Mm-hmm.
There will be none, and that's powerful. If you accept that, and I try to tell young players this, like, if you accept there's no excuses for your play, and you just you mess up, and you move on. That's very powerful, and you can do that in life too. I learned that, like, no excuses. Yeah, but I don't coach him. I don't coach him. I'd like to go back to coaching, but I'd like to go back to my daughter play volleyball. I enjoy watching my daughter play volleyball. Psychotic volleyball dad. Now psychotic volleyball dad. Now I sit a maniac. Like a maniac. I don't know what the hell's going on in the field. I don't know what the hell's going on in the field. I'm not.
Have you learned the game? Or you just scream and yell?
Oh yeah. No. I've learned the game. No. I've learned the game. Not passing right. You know when they're not passing right, or my daughter hit to the net, and I'm like, oh my daughter hit to the net, and I'm like, oh my god. I'm like, how are you going to be a college player? I say nothing to her after the games. The parents look at me like I'm crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand, there's not a lot of East Coast people out here.
Okay.
Or Italians.
Right.
Or how we grew up.
Right.
The passion is just different. They're like, oh yeah, this is great, like very egalitarian. Where I'm like, what's going on?
Right. Sure, 100%.
And I love it. Yeah.
No,
the pizza here is terrible.
What's wrong with it? Is it too thin? Sauce isn't good. What's the problem with it?
All the above. Mm-hmm. All the above. Horrible. It's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible. No downwood here.
What do you like to eat there? Like, what's part of your diet?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, actually, my ex-wife's Korean, so I rice and kimchi, veggies now because I'm at a certain age where I have to look at veggies.
Mm-hmm.
Steak. I've eaten moose. Bear's okay. It's for burgers. But moose and caribou is good.
Mm-hmm.
and then just a standard bill of fare. It's not like I live in the remote Alaska. We have a Walmart here, but there's not a lot of people up here.
Where you live in Anchorage, Alaska?
I'm 15 minutes north of Anchorage.
Okay,
so Eagle River.
Tell me a little bit about the location where you live.
Yeah. Well, yeah, up until this year, we've had great winters of, last year we had 11 feet of snow just in Anchorage alone, and in the mountains way more. This year's been a little warmer. I think we're warmer than you guys. You guys are having quite a winter.
Right.
The mountains are beautiful. It's really stunning here, and that's why I stay, because I hike, I bike the mountains, ski. It's cross country ski, downhill ski. There's ice hockey, so I play in the men's league once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Because I did play at Hilton for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Alaska's great.
How long? How long have you been in Alaska, and what was made your decision to move there?
Yeah, I got here in 2016 from South Korea. I was healing up from some injuries from downrange I had in Afghanistan. In one of our last actions, a pretty good firefight. I was at Fort Drum before that, up in Watertown. But most of that time I was in Afghanistan, like 3 years of that. But so the Army told me I was moving, right? I made the battalion commander list, which is the top 8% of officers. And I was an infantry officer. And so I came here, commanded. I just, the Army, they see when a job's not, if you're not enjoying it more, you should walk away. And I just wasn't having the type of fulfillment from the military, the Army side of it anymore. And so I decided just to kind of retire. And my twins were starting high school, and I didn't want to disrupt their high school flow, because they'd moved like 15 times at that point.
Wow.
And the baby was the baby. She'd moved a few. And so, my ex-wife now, we decided to stay, and I bought a house up here, and she has a house, and it's good. It's different. If anybody from Hilton wants to come up and visit, let me know. You can get my number from Mike, and he'll give it to you.
I got it.
Yeah.
You went to Brockport State, correct?
I did. Played for Coach Rocco Salamone. God rest his soul.
God rest his soul. And you were a history major. What attracted you to Brockport?
Well, they let me play football.
Okay.
And I wanted to go to Hamilton. Honestly, like Hamilton College out by Colgate in Oneida. I went with my dad. Vito, as Lapani calls my father. And it was great. And they had a golf course on there, and it's a beautiful school. I mean, President of the United States went to Hamilton, but then they showed my dad the cost. It was Division III, and they're not paying for anything. My dad's like, "You can't go here," and I was crushed. I was like, "Man, it really hurt." But so Rockport was local. I decided to do. I got to play college football there, which is not as fun as playing high school football.
Mm-hmm.
But it was great, and I thought I was gonna be a history teacher. But one day, I was coming from practice. Actually, I ran into Steve Edsel, who's still in the Army. He went to Hill High School, mate. And Steve's like, "Oh man, there's this great thing called ROTC." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I just ran like 5 miles and I puked all over the place. It was great. And they're yelling at me, and you love it." I'm like, that sounds like a bad time. So I showed up there like 6 in the morning, and I was still playing college football. And this guy, Matt Saunders, and I know I'm all over the place here, but it was great. He goes, "Who are you?" I go, "I'm Jay Gentile." He goes, "Mr. Gentile?" He said, "We're going to run." And we just started running. And I made the run, and it was crazy. And then I just joined ROTC, and I started my Army journey.
Mm-hmm.
It was surprising. There's a couple guys from Hilton there. Mark Ballister was there.
I know who he is. I graduated a year ahead of me.
Mark Pacone.
Yep.
Mark Pacone. and Chris Willis was there.
Yep.
And they're all retired. That's how old they are. And they're probably classmates of yours. But I remember I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm joining the Army. And I stayed in college football, got the letter, played varsity. And I quit after my sophomore year, and went off to airborne school and started just doing things, and I joined the Army.
So the ROTC, you had 2 years of it during college then?
4. I did
4. Okay.
I did during college while playing college football.
So I graduated with Mark Pacone and Mark Ballister, and Chris Willis graduated ahead of me. And through the years, I've seen their pictures in the newspapers and things like that. I'm so proud of you guys, actually. That's awesome to have people around.
Thanks.
With your education for the military, you said you went to airborne school. What was that like?
It wasn't bad. It's pretty easy, except for the fact that you got to jump out of a plane.
Did that scare you at first?
With a parachute.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was there. So you go down to Fort Benning, Georgia, which is now Fort Moore. And I'm 18 years old. 18 or 19, I can't remember. I'm still a cadet. And I get down there. I barely even know how to shine my boots at this point. I've just been in the program, so I learned that. So you go to Fort Benning, and for those of you who haven't been to Columbus, Georgia, it's not the cultural hub that Rochester is.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it was June, and it was like 100 degrees. And I'm like, in full uniform, and you're running in boots. And you're like, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're doing all the cadences. And you jump out of the plane at the end of the training. The 3 weeks prior, they're just beating the hell out of you.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the harness and you're jumping. I'm like, oh my God, sawdust all over you. And I do clearly remember, so we made our bed with the hospital corners, and I didn't want you get to get up and get right for formation, 03, 04 in the morning. So I'd sleep on top of the bed, but they had this clanky AC, and this building was it's like sleeping in the snack shack you guys have at the Hilton football field.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a little less than that. Cockroaches everywhere. So I'd sleep on top of it, just with my PT top, my PT top on top of me, freezing my ass off for 3 hours I sleep. Get up and go, and then I remember the first time we were getting ready to jump, and they open the door, and then jump masters, and you're afraid. I'm afraid to jump. I'm like, I could die, because you could die.
Mm-hmm.
People die in airborne operations up here all the time. Not from thing to think. You get drugged. Your parachute collapses, you fall. But I remember I'm like, you know what? I'm scared, but I'm more afraid of failure. I'm getting out the door. And I learned that from time back in football. I learned that from Rich and them. And it's I the only thing I really feared in this life is failure. But it was interesting. And then a couple years later, I was graduating from college and commissioned, and I went back down to Georgia to start my career as an Army officer. So that was interesting.
Is that this
Ranger School, which was painful?
So that was 4 years of Ranger School. What was that like?
No. So Ranger School is only 72 days.
Okay.
And then I'm Ranger qualified. I wasn't in the Ranger regiment, but I have a Ranger tab. Whatever. But it was. Let me see. What's Ranger School like? Have you ever not eaten for a week and then walked 10 miles a day with 70 pounds on your back?
No.
Not shower?
Thank God.
Well, if you want to do that, go ahead. That's what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest thing that somebody told me the Ranger School was is getting kicked in the balls at a semi-medium pace, about 10 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
It was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for my language. But it was tough. And it's the first thing you do in the military as a young officer or a young enlisted person that puts medium to hard tasks together. And you don't sleep, you don't eat, and you just keep moving. And it teaches you, teaches you about yourself, and what I learned going to ranger school, the human body and the human mind do 10 times more than it thinks it can. And it's true. When you get done, you're just emaciated. Like I remember just I couldn't grow hair back for like a couple months because you're depleted of nutrients, and then you go off to your unit and you start your career. I went off to Korea for 3 years.
That's now, does it really end up being mind over matter? Like your mind takes over during those physical exertions?
I mean, to a point, but you better be prepared, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like anything you want to accomplish. If everything I did up to that point physically led me to being able to complete ranger school. And I say that because it goes back to the kids, and being physically fit as a player. If I hadn't played cardiovascular football, like, Coach Bonnie, can you hear me still?
I can still hear you. Your picture's freezing up. Oh, now you're moving a little bit. There you go.
Okay, just give it a second. I was trying to reconnect. It's Alaska. Okay, we're back. All the things that we've done at Hilton in the sports program kind of led to those moments.
Mm-hmm.
You-
It's so nice for you to always
so
go ahead.
It's challenging.
So now you're off to Korea, and I'm going to let you take it from here about your military service,
Sure.
your traipse around the world,
Sure.
and your times in combat, things
Sure.
like that.
Sure. Yeah, so I went off to Korea. Did 3 years there. I was actually in the 506, which was, if anybody's watched the series Band of Brothers or read the book, that is the unit that's in. So, I mean, I got to actually meet some of the original Eagle Company people like Dick Winters and Buck Compton. If you remember that series on HBO,
Mm-hmm.
it was about World War II. Yeah, I got to meet Buck Compton.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. Only Curry to score a touchdown in the 39 Rose Bowl. Buck S. Compton. Dude still was like neck in like 80s.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I was in Korea. I was up on the DMZ, the demilitarized zone for 3 years. And it was tough. It was you're away from family for 3 years. I hadn't met my wife yet. She lived in Seoul, but and then I was getting ready to leave Korea and get out of the army and go be a high school history teacher and coach football and come back to Western New York and do great pizza carbones. And they parked 2 planes into the towers. And I clearly remember that day. It was 2,100 hours, so 9 o'clock at night, roughly in Korea. And one of the guys comes around the hall. He's like, knocks at the door. He goes, "Sir," I'm like, "What?" He goes, "We're on alert." I go, "What are you talking about?" I go, "These just took the 2 towers. The twin towers just collapsed." And I'm like, "What?" So we went on alert. We went into these foxholes. We didn't know what was going on. Nobody knew, right? Even in America, nobody knew. The planes are grounded. Things are getting canceled. And then we found out, and 3 months later, and I came home, and back then I was a captain. Did some more training, and then I had some friends come back from Afghanistan, and some got really messed up in the first initial invasion. I didn't go to Afghanistan then. We all thought we were going to miss the war, and it's strange, right? As a soldier, you hate war, but it's the most exciting thing you'll ever do.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as an infantry guy, and it's intoxicating. It can be, and I'm not advocating that we do war and kill people, but it is the ultimate test. Jocko Willenick talks about war in his TED Talk. And he says, war will teach you things that you will never forget, lessons. So fast forward, I end up in Fort Lewis, Washington, which is in Tacoma, just south of Seattle. And, we deployed to Iraq in 2004. And I went up to Mosul, Mosul, Iraq, which been pretty destroyed by ISIS in the last couple of years. But I commanded a company there, I was there when a couple of things that happened. We had the Mosul defect bombings, which was pretty terrible. December 22nd, 2004. My couple of friends were killed there. Suicide vest came in, killed about 50 people, 60 people. It was horrible. And that war was tough. And, we came out of there in 2005. I did about 13 months. And I didn't feel positive about what was going to happen in Iraq. And then, 2006 and 2007 was very dark. I went to Germany, and we went back into Iraq for the surge, and it was tough. I mean, you ask anybody who served in Iraq in 6-7, 5, 6, 7. It was we didn't know what was going to happen. The counterinsurgency was just kicking our ass. And so what we had to do is we had the surge. They surged forces in Iraq. I was one of those. We did 15 months. We kind of helped quiet it down, the insurgency. And obviously ISIS then rose up, which was later on. We didn't see that coming. But and then after Iraq, Germany, came home. I went to Leavenworth, which is in Kansas. Not in the jail. I didn't go to prison. I know people in there. Michael Vick was in the Fed at the time I was there.
No kidding.
I didn't get to see him. I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I love Michael Vick.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I went to Kansas for a year. Had my youngest daughter, and I did my master's at Kansas State. And I did an education. I thought I was going to be a teacher eventually. Well, they came down from 10th Mountain Division to Kansas, and they said, "Hey, they kind of interview majors, and they go, "Hey, who wants to go here? Who wants to go there?" And I either want to go to the 82nd Airborne, which was formerly Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty now, or go to Fort Drum, which is Watertown, New York, and be home. And I went to Fort Drum, and it was great, And I got to Fort Drum in July of 2010, and then August of 2010, I was in Afghanistan for like 14, 15 months. And I was on the division staff. I did some time down in the Horn of Panjwai. So I was in Kandahar, which is southern Afghanistan. That's where a lot of the that's where Mullah Omar, he used to lead the Taliban, was from, and so there was a lot of fighting going down there with the Marines. Then I came home after that tour, and I was home for about 11 months, 10 months, and went back to Afghanistan. And I was in Ghazni, which is eastern Afghanistan. And I'll tell you, that was an experience. I was in those combat outposts, we were high up in the mountains. I was a major, so I was helping run the battalion. I was the battalion executive officer, and I was a battalion operations officer. And it was relatively quiet that year. We take a lot of indirect fire. The Afghans, the Taliban knew we were leaving, and this is 2013. We got up to Ghazni. It's called Bob Ghazni, Forward Operating Base Ghazni. Can you hear me? Okay.
Perfectly.
Oh, great. And it was August 28th of 2013, and I was sitting there typing, up a ward, and all of a sudden you hear this boom, this massive explosion. And I hadn't heard an explosion like that since Iraq, when they used to get hit by car bombs and all the vehicle, borne IEDs. Though I don't know how an inanimate object can bear an IED, but it can. But so what happened was the Taliban breached our wall with a 5,000-pound car bomb. It was HME, which is basically a fertilizer bomb. It's the thing that Timothy McVeigh used.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my guys, I remember my intel officer, Big Dick Johnson, his name was Richard Johnson, comes running in. He's a lieutenant. I'm a major. I'm on my fourth tour. I'm pretty. I'm like, he goes, sir. I'm like, what? I go, what? He goes, I think we got breached. I'm like, yeah. I go, stand by. All of a sudden you hear just, small arms fire, recruitment rifle, RPG, and the Taliban is coming over the wall, right? I'm like, and I turned to Big Dick and I said this. I got this when we were soldiers once. I mean, I'm not making this up. And I always wanted to say this. I go, Big Dick. I always want to say this. I go, gentlemen, arm yourselves. I was like, I go, no, seriously, arm yourselves. Like, walk the wall, start shooting people because we're gonna need this. And it was rough, man. I don't mean to laugh about it. Sorry, I'm like, it was serious. And so we were fighting through all that, and another car bomb hit. And then we had suicide bombers, guys in vests who self-detonate themselves. And it's not the first time I've seen suicide bombers, but they came through. And I'll tell you, as we found that out after, one of our guys, Staff Sergeant Mike Oliver, he's 24. He's from Staten Island. Went to New Dorp High School. Staten Island Ferry is named after him. Mike sacrificed his life to save us that day. And I always tell that story. You can look him up. He ran to the breach, and we were going home. One thing, we were going home that night. I was sending guys home to Bagram, out to Kyrgyzstan, to Manis, to go back to Fort Drum. So we were sending flights home that night. We got hit. So it was the last day we were in combat. Mike ran to the breach with a Special Forces A team. And one guy actually got the Medal of Honor out of that. Plumley, he's retired, and a Polish officer, Lieutenant Serpica, I think his name was. And they killed the suicide bombers. They stopped them, but in the melee, one of the suicide bombers rolled over in a partial detonation. When Mike was checking him, he exploded and killed Mike. He was our only casualty in our unit that day, but it was really sad. And he saved our lives, and I never forget his story. He's a massive New York Jets fan. I won't hold that against him. But Michael he got the Silver Star, but then it's been upgraded to the Distinguished Service Cross. And honestly, he should have received the Medal of Honor for that action. We looked into that. It's been up at the highest levels of the Pentagon a few times. But I came home about 8 days after that. And it was tough because you go from this absolute horrific, terrifying, exciting events, fight, your life's on the line and you're doing things, and then you're home back home sitting, like with the kids, and so it was a little bit of a struggle for me, And I didn't notice at the time, but I started having some problems. Like, I'd be withdrawn and cry just out of the blue. But I still had a couple more years to serve. And so I had made the lieutenant colonel list, which was great. I was happy. And we went off to Korea. That helped us. And it was good for a time, but I really struggled. And then I retired in 1 March 2019. After I commanded a battalion, and that's when I really, how the wheels started coming off for me personally. And I shared this openly. Is it okay to talk about this?
Yes, I'm trying to hold back tears because I've never talked to somebody who went through all that you've gone through, and I'm
gonna cry.
I'm just in awe of your story. So keep going to whatever you want to say.
So, I got home, and I was just having some problems, and I couldn't hold a job. And I'm a lieutenant colonel. I have a master's degree. I just couldn't find my niche, in life. And my marriage was falling apart. And we're close now. We're much closer now today, but I was gone for about 10 years of it, with training and deployments, And so, I wasn't there for my kids, and I was drinking. And this is for any veteran listening or any person who's struggling. Alcohol was a big factor. I don't drink like I used to. I maybe a couple beers once in a while. And when I was home last time, I didn't have any alcohol. I was at the reunion. You got to watch that. But I almost took my life. I was ready to kill myself in the VFW parking lot. I had a gun and I knew what I was going to do. And my buddy Thomas Peters called me from the Army. He was a civilian now, and he said, "Hey, you doing okay?" I go, "No, I'm not doing okay." And he talked off the ledge, and I owe Tommy that. And I started on my journey, and got divorced, and but then I go to the vet center, and I started going counseling. I go once every 2 weeks now. I used to go once a week. Started working out again, and just been there for my kids, and then I found a couple jobs. At first, I was working at the Anchorage Downtown Partnership, so they helped clean the city of Anchorage, and I was the operations director. Well, actually, back a little bit. I was driving a forklift. $20 an hour.
Right.
It was great. And Tommy hired, well, I didn't tell the guys what I did. It's kind of like for first time before in the Army. I worked with these really roughneck guys. Well, up here in Alaska, you have oil companies. So British Petroleum used to be up here, and they sold the Hillcore, and these are huge. ConocoPhillips, these are massive oil companies. There's all the North Slope oil. Well, anyway, we delivered supplies there. I drive a forklift, and they clean the bathroom, right? And I bring my computer. And I just work on my resume all day, just kind of get my. And I was covered in soot and shit. So as we were doing a transition plan with one corporation to the next, I drew up this plan on a couple PowerPoint slides. I sent to my friend Tommy, and he sent it to the vice president of the company. He comes down to the docks, and he goes, I'm like, Jason Gentile? I'm like, yeah. I go, yeah. Jason Gentile? I'm like, yeah. I go, yeah. He goes, what do you? And the guys go, oh, you're in trouble. The vice president's here. I go, whatever. I'm like, he goes, what do you do? I go, well, I drive the forklift, I get to the door, and I clean the bathrooms. And one guy goes, yeah, he cleaned the bathrooms great. They've never been cleaner. And he goes, what did you used to do? I go, oh, I was a lieutenant colonel. I was in the infantry tab, and Ron Stars and master's degree, and led a battalion and thousands of people. Look at me like, well, Dr.
Right.
Yeah, I go, sorry. But I go, yeah. I go, and it was just kind of one of those jobs I needed to kind of get me on my path. But so I started working for nonprofits and tried to work with the homeless, and then after a while, I went to go back to government contracting. That's what I do now, and it's been pretty good. About 2 years now, I've been kind of on the path, and when you guys saw me, that's the best I've been. And I'm glad I got to go home for a reunion in fall, because it really helped. Just helped me kind of like get closure, to things.
Mm-hmm.
I got to see people I hadn't seen in years, and it was special. Like I'm telling you, it was special. I cried a few times driving my car around. I used to drive around Hilton and just look at him and talking to Coach Lapani and got all the guys. It was great. It's just kind of my story. It's not over yet.
No, by no means.
I think I'm gonna eventually coach and help kids when I retire from this in 3 years.
What about is your mom and dad still around?
Yeah, they're alive. They live in Florida, God's country, where it's snowing.
Okay. Are you able to see mom and dad very much?
Not much. We talk every day. But in February, my daughter, who's on travel volleyball, we're going down to the Orlando tournament, so I'll be down there with them. I'm taking my son. My son lives with me. That was a conscious choice, which helps. But yeah, I see my parents. I can't believe they left Rochester. I love Rochester.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go home if I could.
If you were talking to a vet who had your issues, and I've heard that from a lot of people, with withdrawn, alcohol, point of suicide, what would you tell them?
Well, I tell them there's hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, counseling or reconciling those demons that resided in me, you can do that through counseling.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, you got to find sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
And then is having a purpose, right? And I run into veterans too, like who they're struggling, and well, find a purpose, whether it's volunteering or work. It doesn't have to be those things, but something that gets you up every day and out of the house and engaged. And also, the thing that helped me is I made a plan for myself, a 5-year plan, and I drew it out, I have it on a PowerPoint slide, and I got it from listening to. You remember Jim Valvano's speech that he gave the SBs many, many years ago?
Sure do.
It's an incredible speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was dying of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you got to know where you're at to know where you want to be or where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you, that helped me more than anything. Because I always knew where I was going to go, right? Even in high school, you kind of know, well, I'm going to go here, I'm going to do some sports, and I'm going to graduate. College, I'm going to be here, I'm going to do this, I'm going to graduate. In the Army, I knew I'm going to do this. I'm going to make these schools, make these ranks. After leave that structure, I was a very highly structured person. When I think about it, you can't lose those. Your peripheral becomes wider. And so I just had to get that, back. And the other thing I tell people who are struggling, whether it's a veteran or not, is, and I just had a friend go through this. His daughter took her life a few weeks ago. It was horrible. We served in Afghanistan together. But there's hope, and there's always hope. And I know that briefs well, especially when people are so dark that they can't see, the hope that's there. But there is always hope.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's God or law, whatever you believe. I mean, I believe in God. I'm Catholic still, but I still, I respect it all. I did more Ramadan. I think I've done Ramadan more times than most Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
Bismillah ala Rakim.
Right.
I speak a little Arabic and Korean, so still. But yeah, so there is hope out there, and you just got to find your path. There's a lot of resources. There is a lot of resources for people, veterans especially.
How did you ever feel fear in combat?
Yes.
And how did you overcome
it? There was one time. Yeah. And I'll give you the example. It's 2007, May timeframe, I think. We're up in Diyala River Valley, which is about 42 kilometers, 35 miles north of Baghdad. And I've been there a while now. This is my second tour in combat. Well, we were clearing these villages, and I still remember their names. Said Mulaid, Said Mustafar, and Naqib. These 3 villages it's called the Diyala River Valley. Beautiful river, green belt in the middle of Iraq. And Iraq's very lush and green. You have the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. It's beautiful there. The food is so good. I'd go back for the food, I swear to God.
Mm-hmm.
I lived with the Iraqi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was with the Iraqi army. So anyway, we were hitting IEDs, improvised explosive devices, all over the place, and I remember 2 times that an operation that week I hit 4 dismounted IEDs personally. The first one, this Iraqi soldier, well, he was a stopwatch. They call it South Iraq, but they're helping us. We came down to a bed down location, and there was a 60-millimeter mortar shell the size of just a little bigger than a coffee cup. And I was like, nobody touch anything. Like, don't touch. It was just like me, one of my other guys, Scotty Freeman. I had my other team over here. I was leading a small team at the time. And this guy picked it up, and it had an anti-tampering device on it. And man, I didn't. Luckily, thank God, because I was like from here about 10 feet away. I turned to talk to Scott, and I had my glasses off because I was so hot. And I just put my helmet back on. Thank God. Crack! I mean, that thing exploded and killed like 5 dudes, like just cut into pieces. And it's like, I'm like, holy shit! And I get knocked out, and I'm laying like this. I look at Scotty, and I wake up. I don't mean to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh my I'm like, I go, there's 4 of us, and I'm the guys, and I go, oh my God, I go, you're hit. He goes, no, sir, you're hit. I'm like, no, I'm not hit. And the dude was just like in pieces, you know. So that happened, and then a few hours, no, the next day we were walking the same villages after we had cleared them, and I had an American captain. I cannot remember his last name. He was new. He wasn't in my unit, but he was with a. He had another small team. I was showing him where stuff was at because they're going to take over. And he stepped on an IED. And it like the moves. It blew him in the air. He lived, but we I picked him up. No, my Matt Natalino picked him up. Sorry, I ran through the IEDs, got a vehicle, and we had a Casavac come out and route. It was terrible. And we got hit 3 days in a row, and then the next day we got hit again. Similar things, small arms fire, and then IEDs went off. A couple of Iraqis got hit, and a couple of Iraqis got hit, and a couple of Americans got hit. Nobody got killed in that one, but I'll tell you, fast forward like a couple of weeks later, we were doing a patrol, and I was walking, and I was like, and I just that fear, like you ever have that dread in your stomach, like something's coming for you, and I felt it, and it was tough because we're getting close to the end of the tour, and that was my second tour, and I was like, man, God, I'm like, please get me through this. I don't want to be killed, but I'd rather be killed than my men get killed. I mean, 100%, right? I mean, that's the deal. As a leader, you got to lay it on the line for them. But man, it was so when you have those kind of fears in you, it's hard. Like you still have to go, and you still got to do the mission. But man, you just got to kind of reconcile that, and it's tough. Like I don't feel that way anymore, but it's still, there's times like when I have not flashbacks or if there's a loud noise or something, and I can feel it on my neck. Everybody gets it, but like for me, it like freezes, and like I sort of breathe through it. Yeah.
How
you got to fight through fear, man. Hard.
How did your family make it through all of your service and your deployments?
Well, I think those impacts on my son. He, definitely missed me, when I was gone. And a couple of times the chaplain would show up at our neighbor's house when their dads were killed, And yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's a real deal. And you don't see that, right? Because you're out fighting and you're doing your stuff. And you're just consumed by all of that because you're working 18, 20 hours a day. And back home, you don't see what the wives go through and the stress. And so I think there's impacts. There's definitely impacts when I came home. I can't speak for every service member. Obviously, this is just my story, so it's anecdotal. But for me, much like football in the Army, I had to singularly focus on it to be successful. Because the Army is a tough mistress. She demands all of your time. And it's serious business. Not just in war, but training, all the things, and you're responsible for all these people. And you have to make sure they're taken care of. And I hate this, and I tell young officers this all the time. Sometimes the Army's going to win, probably a hard 70, and sometimes your family's going to win. And that's the balance, which is not much of a balance. I'm not discouraging people from serving. I love serving. I loved it. But for me, I had to do it that way. And my family suffered, especially when I came home. Because, mom's running everything. Dad comes home, it's like, well, hey, what's up?
Would you have ever done anything differently?
Ooh. In the Army or life?
Well, knowing what you've known, what you've been through, what you've described to me over the last hour or so, would you have ever changed your life and maybe gone an easier path?
No. And I'll tell you, and this is not to be insulting to people, but I feel sorry for people who haven't had to experience the closeness and the camaraderie, fear, and the excitement of what I saw overseas. You know, especially during the war. And that was a long war. That war went from 2001 to 2020 when we left Afghanistan. I mean, we were still in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
We're still in Afghanistan to an extent. Can't talk about that, but no, I miss every day of it. Sebastian Younger talks about this. If you ever read any of his books, he wrote the book War. He wrote the Perfect Storm. He has a TED talk about it. He says he asked the soldiers, like, I miss everything about it because everything is just so, like, everything's important, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't mean to be unempathetic to people, but there's some mundane bullshit that happens in civilian society, you know? And I'm like, people watching airport line, people are pissed. I'm like, it's okay now, you know? So it gives you great perspective, right? On things, and a global perspective on things. I mean, I got to see things. I got to see where Alexander beat Darius, you know, the Plains of Abraham up in northern Iraq. I've been in Alexander's forts in Afghanistan. Outside of combat, you know, just going to Korea, and I've been to the Philippines, and Europe is fantastic. You know, I've been to Normandy. I've actually gotten to the beach at Omaha, up waist deep to feel what it was like, you know, and to see those things, you know, and it's great. And it's hard to replicate that on this side of the aisle after I'm out of the military. But I will tell you this, you know. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
No, please do. Please go. Keep talking.
Playing football, coaching football, being around football, and I thought about this a lot, especially the last 2 years, especially this season watching the Bills. It's about as close to that camaraderie as I ever had. You know, like when I go home and see, hey James, can you just give me a second? Thanks, James. When I went home and, you know, or when I talked to Coach Apani or Coach Prince or Rick Freeman or any guy, you just still feel that connection, you know? And that's the connection I still feel to Hilton. You know? And sometimes I laugh about it, sometimes I cry. I love it.
Well, Jason,
I wouldn't change a thing.
The connection I felt learning all about you, more about your military service. I've really enjoyed this podcast, and I think people are going to get a lot out of it. You're a testament to strength, to courage, to honesty, family, and love of country, love of community, love of brotherhood.
Thank you.
You're retired Lieutenant Colonel Jason Gentile. Thank you for your service to your country, and thank you for joining me on the Big H podcast. You have done yourself, family, and Hilton proud. Please enjoy retirement, private life. Don't leave the podcast because we've got to do some talking. I thank my audience for joining us. You can catch me on X at Michael Heiss 17 or on YouTube at the Big H Podcast or on Spotify at the Big H Podcast. Lieutenant Colonel, you're one hell of a dude. And Hilton is better, and I'm better for knowing you. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Stay safe and stay warm.
The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style. From the highs to the lows, every story just explodes. Mike's got questions on the go, diving deep from head to toe. Every week the guests align, sharing moments so divine. Stay with us, the pace is fine. Every episode you'll find. The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll and style.